So, good morning, everyone. In the last lecture, we have seen the different process concepts. In this lecture also, lecture 3 also, we will be continuing with the same concepts. So, we have seen what is the difference between the program and the process, why we call the program an passive entity and the process an active entity. Also, we have seen the different types of process states, and we have seen the long-term scheduler, and on which criteria the long-term scheduler that chooses the processes from new state and bring it into the ready state. Now, whatever processes are present in the RAM, all of the processes maintain one data structure known as process control block, in short PCB, also known as task control block, that is TCB. So the different fields which are present in the process control block are process state, as we have already discussed the 5 different states, the process number or process ID, PID, which is a unique ID or unique number given to every process for distinguishing between different processes which are present in the RAM. Then the program counter, which is a register which holds the address of the next executable statement. Registers values because CPU normally utilizes the registers for calculation, for temporary calculation purpose, for fasting up the process. So since the registers are limited in number, therefore, whenever CPU switches from one process to another process, then whatever values are present in the registers, they are also stored in the process control block of that particular process, so that whenever that process gets again a chance of execution next time, then whatever values, the intermediate values which we have already saved in the registers, will be uploaded again back into the actual registers from this PCB, process control block, so that that process can start from where it left the last time. So because the registers are holding the intermediate values, therefore we have to save them. And since the registers are limited in number, therefore it might be possible that when the CPU switches from one process to another process, then those register values get overridden by another intermediate values of that particular process. So that is why it is also saved. Whenever the CPU switches from one process to another process, then the register values are saved into the PCB of that particular process. And when again it is executed, or when again it gets the CPU next time, then these register values from the PCB are again loaded into the actual registers, so that we can start it again from the same place where we have left. Then the memory limits are there, the program size, the starting of the program, starting address of the program, and the ending address of the program will also be stored in this process control block. List of open files, the file pointers, their addresses, heap address, stack address for storing the local data and for the global data, etc. All are also kept here in the process control block. So this data structure plays a key role for the smooth running of the different processes, or for the multitasking kind of things. Okay. So we have already discussed in the last lecture about the long-term scheduler and the 2 criteria on the basis of which the long-term scheduler chooses the process. One is the program size, of course, and the second one was the good mix of CPU bound and IO bound process. But the long-term scheduler does this only in the beginning, or only initially. Short-term scheduler and medium-term scheduler are also utilized. So there are basically 3 types of schedulers. The short-term scheduler chooses the process from the ready state. These are the different states. So the short-term scheduler will choose this process from the ready state and bring it into the running state. So short-term scheduler will be implemented basically by the CPU schedule algorithms. The medium-term scheduler will be maintaining a good mix of CPU bound and IO bound process in between also. So long-term scheduler will be maintaining a good mix of CPU bound and IO bound process in the initial phase, or at the beginning itself. But medium-term scheduler will be maintaining this good mix of CPU bound and IO bound process continuously. That is in between also. We will see that how it does so. So look at this diagram. What happens that we know that any process is nothing but a combination of CPU burst and IO burst in an alternate fashion. So what happens that while in the initial phase, the long-term scheduler has chosen good mix of CPU bound and IO bound process. Let us say we have got 5 CPU bound and 5 IO bound process in our RAM in the beginning. But while executing them, what happens that it is possible that 8 of the processes are executing their CPU burst and 2 processes are executing their IO burst. This is possible because we are not aware of that which process will be executing which kind of burst at what time. So if this is the scenario at some particular time interval that 8 processes are executing their CPU burst and 2 processes are executing their IO burst, then what happens that CPU is excessively utilized, but IO devices will be remaining idle more or most of the time. So our efficiency decreases, and to maintain this efficiency or to increase this efficiency, the medium-term scheduler comes into play. So what it does, it is invoked after every some time interval, and it checks whether the currently in our RAM the CPU burst and the IO burst are maintained or are balanced or not. Is it not the case that CPU is being utilized more and IO devices are remaining more and more idle, or vice versa? So if it is the scenario, then what it does, it will partially swap out some of the processes. Like, for example, let us take that at present 8 processes are executing their CPU burst and 2 processes are executing their IO burst. So there is an imbalance, and to remove that imbalance, what it will do, it will remove 3 CPU bound processes out of the RAM into the hard disk. That is, and those will be partially executed swapped out processes, and this process is known as swap out, and it will bring in 3 new processes or swap in 3 new processes inside the RAM so as to balance the CPU and the IO devices, and so as to utilize the CPU and the IO devices continuously at the maximum limit. And that is why this medium-term scheduler plays a key role for maintaining the efficiency of our system. Okay. Right. Now, there is another term known as context switching. So whenever a CPU switches from one process to another process, then this procedure or this process is known as context switching. Now, what happens is that whenever a CPU switches from one process to another process, then the PCB of the current process is saved and the PCB of the next process is loaded. Right? So this process takes some time. Also, to choose one process out of many processes which are present in the ready queue, it will we have to run the short-term scheduler or the CPU scheduling algorithms. It will also take some time. So saving of the current process PCB, loading of the next process PCB, and choosing one process from the ready queue. All these 3 things will be executed whenever the context switching takes place. It means whenever the CPU switches from one process to another process, then all these 3 activities will be taking place. And in these 3 activities, CPU is not doing any useful work. It remains idle, kind of. So this is a pure waste of time, and therefore we should try to avoid, or we should try to minimize this time as far as possible. And the time which this procedure takes is known as context switching time. Okay, so let us look at this example. Suppose we have got the process P0, which is executing currently. Now some kind of interrupt or system call occurs, or the time slice is over, or suppose the CPU is switching from one process to another process. That is, now the CPU had to switch from P0 to P1. So these are the activities which will take place. What will happen? We have to save the current process, that is P0 PCB. Okay, it will take some time. in this time, the CPU will be remaining, the P1 process will be remaining idle. Now, the next process which had to be executed is P1. So its PCB will be loaded. Okay. After that, the PCB one is loaded. The process one will start executing, as we can see here in the right. Now, after the completion of the process P1, again, we will save the state of the process P1 into the PCB1, and again, we will reload the process PCB of the process P0. So these are the activities which takes place whenever the context switching happens, or whenever the CPU switches from one process to another process. So when the CPU switches to another process, the system must save the state of the old process and load the saved state for the new process. As we have already discussed, context switching time is the overhead. The system does no useful work while switching, but we have to do it just because we are executing the multitasking concept, because we have got multiple tasks, multiple processes in the memory, and we have to switch the CPU between these different processes. So this kind of activity is necessary, but it is a kind of overhead. So context switching time should be as minimum as possible. It is time dependent on hardware support also. Okay. Now these are the different types of queues which are also present in the RAM. The ready queue. So here we have got the queue header, and let us say we have got two processes in the ready queue at present, the process PCB5 and PCB1. Then we have got the input output device queues. So let us say I've got hard disk 0, hard disk 1. I've got two hard disk and one printer. So here in the hard disk 1, we have got three processes which are waiting for some kind of communication with this hard disk 1, PCB8, PCB3, and PCB11. So these processes are basically not shifted anywhere. Whenever the processes are going from ready state to waiting state or any other state, then actually the processes are not shifting. Only the pointers are just pointed towards the PCB. So that PCB will be maintaining each and every here, as we can see here. Okay. Okay, so now that is all for this lecture. We will continue with the next part of the process in our next lecture. Thank you.